Welcome to the Alpha Koncepts Podcast, where we're going to talk about everything going on in the gun culture, from training to gear and gun rights advocacy. Hi, I'm Thomas Krall, and I'll be your host on this adventure that we're going on together. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about guns and gear, mostly about older guns, with Mike Quist from Vintage Arms. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Thomas?
Doing great. Thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for having me.
So Vintage Arms, I take it that you trade in older firearms mostly. That's kind of your cup of tea?
When my dad started the business, it was almost exclusively antique vintage pre-1898. Slowly we transferred more, just got more into everything. What I don't do walk-in retail. I'm by appointment. And I don't sell ammo as a rule. I generally will not stock new guns. There's a couple of reasons for it. We do transfers, but pretty much my area of expertise is probably 1960 and back, maybe a little bit 1970. Mm-hmm. I've got an affinity for Smith & Wesson revolvers, especially new in the box from that vintage. Fan of the 1911, and most of its derivatives.
So people will pay a lot of money for Grandpa's old gun.
They can. The biggest thing I hear, like when I'm doing a show, a lot of times you've got a used Remington 870, and it's from a period of time. Probably the most consistent line I ever hear why somebody's entertaining buying something is, I had one when I was young, I had one when I was a kid, for whatever reason they let it go. And a lot like muscle cars, people are trying to recapture their youth. Mm-hmm. There are people that buy for investments. There are people that buy to fill holes in a collection. I will flat out state I do a lot of appraisal work too, and what most people call a gun collection is actually an accumulation of firearms.
So what's the difference between an accumulation of firearms and an actual collection? Because I'll tell you right now, I am not really a collector per se by the definition of the word. I am more of an accumulator. I look at firearms as tools. I don't have 10 different hammers just because they look pretty. I have, 4 or 5 different hammers because each one is a different size or a different use. And I don't look at firearms any differently. So I'm an accumulator. What would be your definition of a collector?
Well, let's put it this way. Mostly, you need 3 guns. You need a handgun that you're comfortable with for self-defense. You need a rifle appropriate for whatever big game you happen to hunt, if you hunt big game. You need a shotgun for birds of the wing and playing around with sporting clays. Anything beyond that is no longer a need, it's a want. So we fill the holes in the want thing. Now, the difference between a collection and accumulation is you kind of hit it on the head. You buy what you want or you buy what you think you need, and you don't really care if it fits the mold, so to speak. A true collector, there's an underlying theme. Maybe they collect guns of a certain period of time, guns from a certain manufacturer. One of the biggest things you see where you get kind of a hodgepodge of guns and the only consistency is people that buy guns from the year they were born. The problem with that is most of the information you find relating to data manufacturer is off. So if you're really hung up on it, you might be disappointed if you knew the truth. From that point on, there's people that collect engravers. There's people that collect odd calibers, 1-year guns. I have a friend that collects Colt Magnum carries. He has almost 300 of them new in the box. It's a gun they made for 1 year, and they made approximately 8,000 to 9,000. Colt doesn't even know how many they actually made. They've called him for information on what they made over the years. That's what he collects. He also has he collects Colt wheel guns. He's got a Python collection that'd blow your mind. That's a collection. There's a theme to it. Accumulation is what you said, and there's not a darn thing wrong with it. The difference is, if you're actually collecting, you need a better knowledge base. Now, there's a term that gets bandied about in the gun community, and that is they never did that, meaning the factory. And that is a term that you want to say very cautiously, because through most of the quote-unquote golden age of gun making, if you had a request, the factory would attempt to accommodate. And when you really never want to say it is Smith & Wessons, because, man, I'll tell you what, I've seen more bizarre factory correct Smith & Wessons than any other manufacturer.
What you're saying is they had a pro shop before they called it a pro shop.
Yeah, they took orders. Colt did too. Colt was a little more consistent. You will see some odd, like in the single action army, you will see occasionally an odd barrel length, but they tried to hold to that. You see a couple of really low production calibers. Winchester did the same deal. And this is where the collecting nightmare begins, is I have one of the rarest 1894s ever produced. Unfortunately, the factory letter does not support the gun, but the gun is correct. So you're literally looking about $4,000 to $5,000 in value scrubbed off because the gun won't. Now, somebody that actually knows what they're looking at, they can determine the gun was built the way it is. Factory letters, and it's something that when you get into collecting, Colt, Smith & Wesson, Winchester, Ruger, Marlin, yes, L.C. Smith, yeah, because it comes through, both of those come through Cody, Wyoming, or the Cody Museum. Up to a certain period of time, the factory production record exists. In most cases.
So let me ask you this. Sorry to cut you off, but I really gotta get an answer to something.
Yeah.
Why is the gun? Is it with that letter? Does the gun shoot better?
It doesn't shoot better, but the number of the comma I can put on the dollar sign changes dramatically.
Why would someone pay $5,000 extra for a gun that doesn't shoot better or worse because of a piece of paper?
Because it's factory correct.
Well, see, to me, again, firearms are tools, right? I don't care if it's factory correct, because I'm a Bubba. I will take any firearm and change it to suit my needs. I'll take a screwdriver and I'll put a torch to it and I'll bend it if that's what I need to do to accomplish a job. I'll take an old gun with a cracked wooden stock and put a brand new, Tapco stock on it because that old stock was a piece of crap. I might be killing the quote-unquote collector value, but personally, I don't believe there is any such a thing as collector value.
Sure.
I know that people will pay a lot of money for old stuff because of letters. I get it. That is a real thing, but I can't understand for the life of me why people would do that.
Same reason they do it with model trains, the same way.
Oh, but again, I can't wrap my head around that idea either. Or cars, you'd spend $60,000 for a 1950 Chevy, or go get something newer that's more comfortable, rides nicer, better fuel efficiency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But people do it, and I don't understand it. I'm hoping you can enlighten me.
How old are you?
43.
Okay, you'll either start to make the turn or you'll never make the turn.
I will never make the turn.
Never say never, man.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that, but I know who I am on this topic.
All right, on this topic, the day somebody walks in and puts in your hand a Winchester 1886 and 4590 or 50 caliber that's in 98% original condition, and it was manufactured in 1890, you feel and appreciate what's going on there. It's like art. Consider it art more than guns. I did a historical presentation for my local library, and the progression of manufacturing talent, skill, inventiveness is really, of this country, actually of the world, is based in two places: firearms and agricultural equipment, and a great number of bicycles too. A great number of firearm manufacturers actually got their start in either agriculture or bicycle or Eli Whitney, yada yada yada. There are history buffs for everything, and they gravitate towards it, and they get jazzed over. The difference is, you take, in the case of my 94, prior to moving production, they made 7 million non-commemorative 1894 Winchesters. My gun is probably one of a dozen that were built that way. So you have a rarity into it that's just phenomenal. Plus, the gun has a lot of condition going for it. And I got to cover this. Just because it's old does not mean it's valuable. If it looks like you pulled it out from under a house, it's still a rusted up piece of crap. If it's a side-by-side shotgun, and this is where people get really led astray. If you run across an old side-by-side shotgun, a lot of them are extremely valuable, but the biggest part of it is how good are the barrels. And if the barrels aren't any good, move on to another one. I don't care who the manufacturer is, because the repair or replacement cost offsets any value that gun may have. There are
unless you're trying to restore it because it was your grandfather's gun and you just want to have a piece of his legacy. That's sentimental value, not collector value.
And my advice in that case always is pull the firing pins and hammers out of it, do the external work on it, and leave it alone. Because, one, you don't want, the whole Damascus thing is nothing but a myth. Good Damascus is better than bad fluid steel. And if you don't know what Damascus is, I'll tell you, it's a blanket term. But it was if that gun is really unsafe, you don't want to jeopardize it, and you don't want to put $4,000 having a set of barrels made or having a set of barrel sleeves for $2,500 into a gun that's worth $300 on a best day. And if you do that kind of work, maybe, a really rare Purdy might warrant it, but for the most part, they don't. And that's the underlying theme on that. Rifles are a little bit different. If it's safe to shoot, it's safe to shoot. If it's not, the biggest thing I see in the rifle category is so much of the ammo or ammunition was black powder based. The primers were corrosive. Barrels get chewed up pretty bad. One, they weren't that accurate to begin with. Two, the biggest offender are the little 22 rifles. For $150, get the barrels. I mean, it's that simple. But back to the actual collecting thing, it's generally people that have enough money to do what they want. It definitely falls to the older side. You find military collectors that are fascinated with certain things for whatever reason. The reasons are varied as much as the guns are. My dad served in Iwo Jima and they carried this and I want one. Or people in his unit carried this, that, and this. Everybody in the free world that knows anything is keeping their eyes up for one of the illustrious Singer-produced 1911. Unfortunately, there's probably 10 times as many fakes as there are originals in that category. You can get lost in it. And the thing I would point out is if you find yourself getting deeper and deeper into something, try and make it something where reference material is available. A few years back, I had updated a lot of my reference books, and at the end of the year, I was doing taxes. The guy said, "Did you really spend that much money on books?" And I said, "Yes." And it was pushing $8,000 that year alone. That's the information you need. It either helps you identify something that's undervalued or it keeps you from overpaying for something that's overvalued. Books are great. There's a few of them that are better than others depending on what you're doing, but it's a knowledge base. Just because the book says it doesn't mean it's always true.
Right. Well, I would assume values are fluctuating on a weekly basis. I mean,
say biannually. You see ebbs and flows. I mean, actually, the prices come down. Let's take 2020 off the table.
Yeah, this is a odd year for pretty much anything.
Yeah, it is. So we can't really say this year is a good indicator. But prices come down in the summer. People are busy doing things with their family. They're actually busy shooting. The gun show industry, the gun collecting industry is a 3-season activity for the most part. Mainstream guns, not so much, but what I do, we slow down definitely in the summer. Starting late August, we'll pick up. We run hard right up until before Christmas. The week between Christmas and New Year's generally dead. First part of January, you see a little bit of activity, but as people begin to anticipate tax refunds and stuff, then Then it
And
picks
you
up.
do a lot of gun shows. So, I mean, you travel around the Midwest doing, going to gun shows, buying, selling, etc., right?
Yes,
And in fact, you also host a gun show in Illinois.
I do. When so far in 2020 we haven't, but yeah, I do. I have a small gun show up in Antioch that we do 3 times a year, and we actually get a little bit away from what I do. I mean, I bring what I have. We gear it towards families. We gear it towards new shooters. We do a youth gun giveaway at every show. One of those new Henry 22 lever action rifles. We give one of those away. 17 and under, you get a free raffle ticket. We do a Toys for Tots drive in November. I'll find something a little bit off the wall in my travels, donate it. The only way you can get in on the drawing is either a new toy or a $20 minimum raffle ticket. So you win that, the Marines collect the money, they collect the toys, everybody's happy, down the road we go. So that's my little gun show. Unfortunately, Northern Illinois suffers on a number of ways in the gun show environment. One is having any dealers travel into Illinois for a show just doesn't happen. Years ago, there were 3 premier shows in the country: the Tulsa Arms Show, the Las Vegas Antique Arms Show, and the Midwest CADA shows. And as our laws tightened up, and as municipalities became more resistant, the CADA show just went downhill, and it couldn't be saved. There were some behind-the-scenes things that transpired prior to me being involved, but the biggest thing was getting people to come to a gun show from out of state in Illinois doesn't happen. The other problem in Illinois is finding, especially Northern Illinois where I'm from, finding affordable venues in a gun-friendly community is really difficult.
Oh, tell me about it. For my training classes, when I need to rent classroom space, if I'm doing a private class or something and I need to get classroom space in the area, I might make 20 phone calls before I find a yes. And then the price is what it is, but it's more than it probably should be.
Well, when I was searching around when I initially started, I looked at one of the local hotels. They wanted $10,000 for the weekend. The numbers don't work. I mean, the numbers really barely work for my show. It doesn't make a great deal of money. Sometimes it loses money. Generally, I can either sell my way out of it. There's 3 rules to a gun show. You sell your way out of it, you buy your way out of it, or you eat your way out of it. Well, I live in Antioch, so I eat at home. That's how that works. It's, while we're doing gun shows, I'll give you a tip. If you ever do decide you're looking for things of value, okay, this isn't really an investment guide, but this is things of value. As you're walking through a table and you're looking at dealers, you will kind of notice a theme on most dealers' tables. Not always, but the majority. They'll have very similar items. Do not look at those items initially. Look at what doesn't fit. If you've got a guy that's got all German Lugers and 4 sporting shotguns or 3 AR-15s, those are actually the guns to look at first. And he's going to fall into one of 2 categories. He's going to either be blue book high, or he's going to be towards the lower end, more reasonable prices. The reason for the lower end is it's not what he deals with, it's not what he really cares about. He just wants to turn the inventory. More than likely, he bought a collection or an accumulation, and they were in there. The high side of it is they sat down with the blue book and picked out the highest value they could possibly find and hung it on there. And I truly believe there are dealers that just like arguing with people. It's funny to see, but sad to endure. I can walk a medium-sized gun show in less than an hour, and if I'm looking to buy, I'll find what's available to be bought. That being said, I have some friends who are dealers down in Kentucky. They deal high-end Colt Smiths, Winchesters. Their Browning collection is second to none outside of the factory. And those guys hit every gun show, every major gun show in the country, and they buy. And they bring their money, they bring their license, and they know what they're looking at. They know what they can pay. They're not looking for astronomical margins. And they make a really good living doing it. So there is money to be made if that's your thing, but you got to be darn certain of what you're doing if you want to go that way. And I'm going to back that statement up with this. When the economy crashed in the mid 2000s, early mid 2000s, a lot of money came out of the stock market. A lot of money came out of real estate. People didn't want to go to traditional investment devices simply because they either weren't getting a rate of return, they couldn't get the financing, whatever the case was. A lot of that investment grade money went to three places. Went to collectible wine, collectible art, collectible guns. In turn, it drove the collectible gun market absolutely insane. And it was carrying astronomical figures until about 2014, 2015, and the perfect storm hit. The one thing was people needed to get liquid again to get back into what they do, real estate, stocks, whatever. Two, we had a great number of lifetime actual collections come to market and go to auction. And I'm talking, 400, 500, 600 piece collections that were pristine, complete, people that wrote books on individual guns, and they would pass away. The families generally were more interested in the money, either from need the money or there was no equitable way to distribute it among the heirs. Okay? Those guns came to market, and it basically flooded the market in collectible guns, and it drove the prices down. One example, 2015, if you had a clapped-out Winchester 1866 carbine, price of admission for a beat-up one, $3,500, $4,000. A good one, easy five figures. Some of them got into the mid five figures. I had a conversation with the gun director for a friend of mine, but from one of the major auction houses in Vegas in February, and we were talking about prices coming down, and we keyed on the 66s. And he said, right now I have 162 of them to sell. He said, I will not take any more for sale. I will not take a reserve price on them. And I'm telling people that have them in, don't be surprised if it auctions for $2,500 for a good example. So you do see a lot of fluctuation. The flavor of the month. Even in new guns, you're probably more familiar with this. You're young or you're old enough to remember early 2000s, the hot setup was the HK USP. Am I right or wrong?
Sure.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, if I'm doing my lineage correct, and I'm doing this from what I remember doing transfers on, the Springfield XD kind of replaced it, even though they're not tit for tat. They're darn certain weren't the same value. The XD ran strong. The liquidity in the USB market went away. You just didn't see them anymore. Then it got into SIGs and Glocks. Revolvers actually made a little bit of a comeback for a while. Then when in Illinois in particular, then we got deep into the little tiny concealed carry stuff. So it's forever evolving. And the internet drives it, magazines drive it, 9 versus 45, 45 versus 10, 40 is the greatest thing. All of that stuff indicates or is pushing a market that either didn't exist or is underserved. But
well, it's like when the joke was, what's tactical? Every manufacturer was relabeling their products as tactical. Well, what's tactical? Oh, well, you paint it black and double the price. That's tactical. And then that kind of sort of went away. And then we had the zombie. Remember, everything was painted green, and they doubled the price. It's the zombie slayer. You had zombie ammunition and zombie painted magazines. And I still have a box of zombie painted P-mags if anyone's interested. And then, then Flat Dark Earth, FDE. There's there are definitely trends and ebbs and flows to the market. You're absolutely right about that. When it comes to new stuff, I think that there's a lot of monkey see, monkey do with the manufacturers, and they see like, oh, manufacturer A put out this, and it seems to be doing pretty well. We need to bring our own to market, and then they start spending dollars and competing against each other, and then all the little guys start, jumping on the train ride, and then the next thing, a couple of years later, comes out.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there was a couple kids in my neighborhood up into the Antioch there, and they were selling lemonade by night, or lemonade by day, moonshine by night, and closed that place down and started building 1911s and ARs. I mean, everybody got into it, and they never really caught my flavor. I mean, I don't not like them. I just not what I do. So, yes, and that is a difficult from a business standpoint. I mean, can you imagine you're at the SHOT Show in January last year, and you're trying to stock your store for the upcoming year, trying to cover all the bases, how much of everything to buy, and then COVID hit. I still getting cold called for 9mm ammo and Glock this, Glock that. I don't know much about Glocks. Don't care if I ever do, but I feel in a way bad for the people. Plus, you're competing with the internet. If there's 5% margin on a new gun, I'm going to be surprised. And I know for a fact because I've done it for friends or attempted to do it. I've seen guns through my distributors that I can buy out of an online site for less money than my wholesale cost, usually with shipping. So the new gun market is difficult to navigate. A little shop like me, I mean, I couldn't survive on the margins, and I don't really enjoy it, so why do it? I mean, I spent 30 some odd years in the construction game, and I got out of that to do this because there's more money in this, and it's a heck of a lot more peaceful. And that's me. I mean, then we got guys like you that bring stuff in. Hey, I tried to do this with it. What can I do now? And, a lot of times when Bubba works on something, he's really building a nice lampstand or he's building some great tomato steaks. I have friends in the industry that are gun makers, not gunsmiths, and they're artists. They're artists of metal. They're artists of wood, and they've forgotten more than I'll ever know, and I don't even attempt to make it. But that's the kind of thing that people will get drawn into on the collecting side. On the accumulating side, some guys just like 30-30. Some guys just like 41 mags. I happen to be one of them. Some people really like in the box 50s, 40s, 60s vintage 38 Super Colt. I might be one of those. That's what drives me. And I don't buy a lot of them because they're god awful expensive. But every now and then I'll snake one for myself. That's me. And I'm not saying accumulating is wrong by far. It's not. And it's just collecting has a different refinement to it, I would say. Maybe that's the best way to say it is you're buying with a purpose. And most collectors will pass on a gun. Let me rephrase that. They will buy as much condition and originality as they can afford at the time. So you've got a Luger that's in poor condition. It's original, poor condition, and rare. Believe it or not, there are people that will pass on that gun going for one that's in higher condition because they have the money and they want the best example they can afford. They may not be able to buy the best example in condition, but they can do better than what you have. Does that make sense?
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, but it doesn't make sense in my brain. Why? Let me ask you this. Collectors, do they shoot their guns or do they just put them in the safes and enjoy them?
Yes.
Yes, so there's both. There's each type, or you're saying yes, they just put them in the safes?
No, I'm saying yes, there's both types. There is, if you have a gun that's doubtful you could shoot it safely, it's worthless.
Absolutely agree. It is recycled material.
Yes. Okay. Even if you think it's collectible, it's still worthless. If you have a gun that could be safely shot, but it's in such high condition you may not want to, that's your choice. You lay your money down, it's yours, you do what you want with it. I mean, there are people that are grabbing every new Corvette they can find and parking them in garages under tarps, and in 10 years they're all going to come to market, and they'll probably bring less money than the sticker price. Okay? On the gun side of it, there are people that will not touch a gun. They cannot shoot, and there are some that shoot it. 4570 is a really popular cartridge for people that collect to shoot. 4440 or 44 WCF is the same way. 45 Colt is also one that people just really enjoy shooting. There are some that they would shoot it if they could find ammunition for it. That can sometimes, in the old obsolete cartridges, there are guys that'll buy a gun that's in a really off-the-wall cartridge and then spend a tremendous amount of time figuring out how to reload for it. I mean, they're just that deep into it. I'm not, but I can appreciate the skill and effort it takes to bring that thing back to service. So my advice, if the one place I would say never shoot it if you're looking for value is Colt Winchester commemoratives that are in the box with all the papers, that have never been racked, that have never been fired, have the outer sleeve. Because all you're doing is turning it into a shooter-grade gun that you could have bought for a lot less money. Or less money, put it that way. Beyond that, if you want to shoot it and you can safely, go for it. I've got a pretty fancy Winchester Model 12 engraved by a very noted engraver and all inlaid and everything. I finally broke down and shot it the other day. I hadn't shot trap, but we did a charity trap shoot, and I actually enjoyed shooting. So the call is yours. There are people that will argue on both sides of that, and there is no right answer because it's your choice.
Owner's preference.
It's Ford versus Chevy. You are, every bit aware you're putting on it. If you ever go and sit down with a blue book, which I knew Steve before he passed away, actually set up next to me in Tulsa, we would chat a lot. But if the one place there's some accuracy, even if the numbers aren't right, the percentages are. Go and look at 100% value, 98, 95, and you'll discover in the collectible side of guns, 40% or more of the value of a gun is in that last 5%. And 5% where ain't much. So, again, it's your gun, do with it what you would, or will.
Yeah, for me, I want to shoot it. Like I said, if I've got the firearm, I'm going to put rounds through it. That's part of the reason. And it's just like you said, if it's got wear, it lowers the value. So here, if I was to pay, $5,000 for a firearm that I can't shoot, well, I've got a lot of other things I'd throw $5,000 at if I had the money. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm in kind of a weird position because I have to support both end uses. I do, I don't want to put a gun in anybody's hands that shouldn't have one. But what you do with it, and I'm not saying sticking up at 7-Eleven, but whether you take it home and admire it or you take it out and shoot it, that's your call. I have two Weatherby custom shop 460s. I don't shoot those. The reason I don't shoot those is because I kind of value my arm. And I'm never going to do a safari. I have no desire to hunt big game. But the people that buy those will shoot them a little bit, and they're usually for safari or they're one-ups. They just happen to be custom shop guns, so they're going to fall a little more towards somebody that's looking for something unique. By the same token, I see a lot of M1 carbines. And the nice part about M1 carbines was none of the carbine ammo was corrosive. So they usually have a pretty decent bore in. And it's real easy to find an M1 carbine that's been through either an arsenal overhaul, a battalion overhaul, or flat out rebuild.
Well, that's a great point. Let's actually talk about M1 carbines because recently there was a huge stockpile of M1 carbines, I believe, in Ethiopia that was recently discovered, and now they're bringing them or trying to bring them into the States. What's your thoughts on that?
It'll flood the market. It'll drive down the shooter value prices of it.
And I'm looking forward to that because, to be honest with you, I've heard nothing but great things about the platform, and I'd love to get my hands on an appropriate priced one so that I can shoot.
You pay really, really, really close attention. Occasionally an M2 will slip in too. But they are. And, you know, when companies go into business either importing or remanufacturing, either from the M14s the same way, either from new parts or your old USGI surplus, there's something to that. There's a reason people enjoy it. And I've shot the M1 carbine. It's a riot to shoot. Non-2020 ammo's available. It's affordable. They're lightweight. They're easy to carry. They're kind of like a 1022. You can trick them out a little bit without getting carried away. When you get into the collector side of it is where people get stuck. You get into fake guns. You get into guns that were never built as paratroopers and tankers and stuff like that. Probably, as a slight aside, the three places, if you ever find yourself wanting to buy guns for collector value, I'm not even going to say investment, just collector value. The three places you can get bent over and taken advantage of are single action Colts, Lugers, and then a lot of military guns. Because most single actions were used hard and put away wet, as were most Lugers. And they've been altered, changed, refinished. If you're paying for that as an original gun, then you want to make sure you're actually getting what you want. That's when finding somebody that knows what they're looking at, usually a dealer or an advanced collector or knowledgeable collector, and they're willing to take the time to show you, you know, this is why it's right, this is why it's wrong. So, make those relationships strong and make them last, you know, because they can save you a lot of money, or they can point you to the value of a really good piece that you may have overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, onto the imports. I would venture to say the majority of them have probably been reworked once at least. Some of them multiple times. If you're buying it as a shooter grade, as long as the gun goes bang and everything fits correctly and works like that, you shouldn't care.
I'm just looking for plinkers.
Yeah, if you're searching out an all-original Type 1 Winchester and you stumble into it, trust me, the people doing the importing know what's hot, know what's not. I was offered a job doing that years ago, buying up mill surplus over in Eastern Europe. And they know what to look for. They know what to segregate. They know what to offer. It's premium items. It's not unknown. They're not stupid. So those guns will come out in separate batches, and you can pay more for it. And then you can read on the internet how people I think by nature want more than they pay for. It's almost impossible to do. But
everyone wants a deal.
Everyone wants a deal, but at the same point, you know, you're not going to get a $1,200 M1 carbine for $400 unless you just happen to get exceptionally lucky, and I've never been that lucky. So if you're looking for a shooter grade, and just pay attention to when they're offered for sale. Pay attention to what you think you're buying. And if it comes to what you really thought you were buying, you're good to go. Make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The first wave, you know, I would just guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm anticipating, and you know more about this than I do. I would imagine the first wave might not drive the prices down, because a lot of people are going to be super interested. There'll be marketing dollars spent, etc. But then the second wave probably will start to push the prices down as the early adopters, so to speak, have already satisfied their itch with the first wave. And, plus you've got the existing inventory and people are passing away and they're going on auction, et cetera, et cetera. So probably be a couple of years that the price really starts to go on a downward trend. And that's when someone like me looking for a shooter grade, a plinker, is going to swoop in and buy up one or two.
Actually, you're half right, because the one thing that has to happen to all these guns when they hit the shore, they have to be import marked.
Yes.
And that separates original GI from a re-import or an import. It always has, it always will. If you have a Blue Sky, you have an Alpine, even if it's 100% GI correct, probably a 15 to 20% ding. So as much as there's going to be downward pressure, I think it'll occur faster than you're giving it credit for. I haven't seen what any intended pricing will be, and God only knows if it'll actually come to fruition. Remember, those guns have been this long time. There was a boatload of Korean guns that were sitting offshore, Garans and carbines, primarily carbines, and they could never get approved to get them into the country. Remember, they made $6 million and change M1 carbines, and the majority of them were given away or lend-leased or whatever you want to say at the end of the Korean War, and that's where they stayed. So, or they went to other countries. They just didn't come back. They didn't ever come from it at that point. So it's the collector side of it. There's some really good reference material on M1 carbines. What they basically do is you end up looking at charts, and the first thing you match up is that the serial number is correct for the maker. And then the next thing you look at is how the barrel is marked. Is the barrel original? And then you work backwards from there. If you have a replaced barrel, which is not an uncommon thing, it's a shooter-grade gun. You may have a boatload of collector parts in it, but it's a shooter-grade gun. If it's original, you continue to work backwards. Now, once you're inside of the gun, if somebody changed the sear or changed the actual trigger or changed a minor part, it's never mattered that much to me. These were implements of war, and they were, used hard and put away wet.
Yeah, things would break. Things needed to be repaired. They weren't worried about collector value. They were worried about saving their lives.
Yeah, and they did battalion-level repairs. I mean, I've seen wood repairs. You'll see an entire rifle put into a stock that was replacement stock, or it was put into another stock that it shouldn't have had. What does that mean? I don't know. Let your conscience and your wallet be your guide. So I think that mostly what will happen is you'll find magazines coming down in prices. You'll start seeing surplus ammo being sought out and brought in at a more prodigious rate, and people will gravitate to the one thing a carbine has over a Garand. It's about half the weight. It's also nowhere near as powerful a gun, but
of course. Much difference in the round that they're firing. They're not even close.
I had a Ruger Blackhawk in 30 carbine. It's not an uncomfortable gun to shoot. It's a glorified pistol cartridge. And they were made for smaller people to carry, and they were made where a smaller rifle was appropriate. That was the intention behind it. Most of them tended to go during World War I. They usually went to the Asian theaters as opposed to the European theaters, because the people were smaller. We were arming indigenous troops, and you did have heat to contend with and things of that nature. So that's my take on it. I do think it'll bring the price down. I don't really think there'll be any true collector grades just because of the import stamp thing. And that started, you actually got to watch it on some of the ones you see. Originally, they micro-stamped them in. Unless you're in good light, you can literally mis-stamp it. I think it's 1/16 of an inch and not very deep, and all of a sudden once you see it, you'll never not see it again, but you can look at a gun 3 or 4 times and see the import stamp. So that's that.
Well, that's very interesting. So you think that one day I'll get bit by the collector bug?
Maybe. I think you're still refining your business. You're enjoying shooting. I mean, I don't know you well enough to pigeonhole you. You may be at a range someday, and I was down at Buffalo, the place in Ottawa, not last spring, but the spring before, first one. And I brought a Rigby rifle, bolt rifle, in 375 H&H, and a friend of mine brought a 470 Nitro Express side by side. And I brought a couple single actions too. And people that were interested in shooting them definitely perked up. Well, the one guy almost fell over backwards. We did catch him, but they get a little smile and a twinkle in their eye. And there's something about taking a 100 or 120-year-old gun and sending lead down range. I mean, it's just fun. And then when the guns are still works of art on top of it, or beautiful things, or good examples, what's not to like? Would I want to take one into a gunfight? Probably not. I'm taking a trip real soon here, and I'm not arming myself as a carry gun with a Colt single action. I wouldn't hesitate were I to go bear hunting, although I have no anticipation of doing it. I would take my Rigby, moose hunting, elk hunting, anything like that. It's just I put it this way. Back when we did the radio show, I was arguing with Clint Hartford up at 5-Star. He was one of the co-hosts. And kind of deviating from the guns I just mentioned, but he's a Glock Sig kind of guy, and I like him anyway. And we were doing the whole 19, and I could care less. Shoot what you're comfortable with, and shoot what doesn't fail you. It's really what I most agree with, especially in the personal defense. But a long time ago, I met a guy, and he was about my age, and we used to do shows together. And when I was in college, one of my majors was English. And we were outside one day having a cigarette. And he collected pre-1898 shotguns. I was doing a lot of side-by-side, American primarily, a lot of Winchester. And I made the comment. I said, I don't really know what it is that attracts me to these. I said, I've never been able to put it into words. And he said, Mike, it's because new guns have no soul. And that's the best way I've ever had it explained. And the way I tried to explain it to Clint, because being a Glock fan, I had to speak slow. Plus, he lives in Wisconsin. You're talking to a Packers fan, so you gotta kind of tone things down. I said, okay, take 100 Glocks, Glock 19, lay them on the table, do nothing else, and I walk you into the room, pick out your gun. You won't. They all look alike. But if we take 100 1911s, let's say Series 70 and older, lay them on a table, you'll find your gun. There's just enough little bit of difference in that gun from appearance that it makes it yours. You'll recognize it. Most of it.
You know what we did when I was in construction? Everybody had their own color spray paint.
Mm-hmm.
And all my tools were painted orange. One guy, he had pink, etc. So when we laid them down, we knew who had whose tools. By the end of the day, everyone's got a hodgepodge of different colors that we then sort out and give back to the proper owner.
Yes, that's the Glock thing. On the other hand, don't touch my 1911, and we'll get along just fine. Hell, I collect serial numbers on occasion, running threes. Just a weird thing with me. There are people that collect, first-year guns. There are people that collect guns with 2-digit or 1-digit serial numbers. Doesn't matter what the gun is. That's just their thing, and there's no right or wrong to it. Really, it is what it is, and there's a lot worse things they could doing. And what I have found is most people that stick with it tend to get more into the history, start to discover. We were talking earlier, I said about the progression of manufacturing. A great number of firearms manufacturers ended up in the typewriter business. Remington, for one, Lyman Smith, L.C. Smith, a few others. Then you get into the war manufacturing, and it completely blows your mind the companies that were making things and what they were making.
Oh, sure. That war effort really exploded the manufacturing of firearms into companies you wouldn't even imagine. All of a sudden, are making guns for government contracts.
You had Rockola build an M1 carbine, National Postal Theater. That is the one fun thing about M1 carbines. I don't know what'll happen to it necessarily with the large stock that's available to come in, but there were so many manufacturers. You can literally just spend your time trying to build an original, correct, high-grade collection of all the manufacturers. There weren't as many on the M1 Garand, but there definitely was on the carbines. Hell, there was a fair number that made 1911, through both wars. I think some of the prettiest ones that were ever made were the World War I 1911 Springfields, which were made at the actual Springfield Armory, not the commercial rendition. The other really pretty ones were Remington UMC. It's also the rarest one after the Singer. U.S. Switch and Signal made some beautiful guns in World War II. They have just, if you can find an original one, the finish, even though it was mil-spec, finish they put on those guns, absolutely gorgeous. So whatever really drives your fancy can lead you into whatever direction you go. And it's not uncommon to see people all of a sudden start buying other things. The one place guys will buy a gun, and they're people, not guys, don't want Randy mad at me, but reenactors. Reenactors are generally super into it for the historical side as opposed to firearm. So you go to a Civil War reenactment and you see a lot of reproduction guns. Now what you'll find is the gun they have is historically accurate. Either it was made that way or they sent it up to Lodgewood and Lodgewood rebuilt it. Their character carried that gun in war. At least what that gun is supposed to represent. They don't really care to run out and spend tons of money on an original example because, quite honestly, they're using it everywhere. So there are times where people are into the gun thing, sort of, but they're not really collectors. They're more into just the historical aspect of it. Another one that you encounter is a lot of early American weapons were made by small town guns. And usually they would mark it. Now they would buy the majority of their parts, fit everything together, slap their name on it, done. They went. New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio were pretty heavy areas for this. You start to find family members buying them. They've done the genealogy in the family. They may be anti-gun, but because great uncle Jedediah manufactured guns back in 1840, and we ran across an example, they're on that like a dog on a bone. So again, there is no rhyme or reason per se as to why people gravitate to what they gravitate. There are people that collect air guns. I'm like, okay, great. And they have a good time with it. Maybe that's really if you're not enjoying it, don't do it.
Absolutely. I think that's what it's about. It's the enjoyment of doing it, or they wouldn't do it. Other than the people that are doing it for an investment to flip and make financial gain, which I'm sure enjoy as well. If you're not enjoying it, it's probably not worthwhile venture.
The problem with that is it's unstable markets. There are people that, I'm a dealer.
Well, Mike, we've spent quite a bit of time in the past. Let's look to the future here. 2021 is kind of around the corner. We're recording this at the very beginning of October, and we've only got a couple months into 2021. What's your forecast? Are you going to try to do some gun shows next year, assuming that our fine governor allows us, or what are you thinking? What's coming up for you in the future here?
I'm going to try. We have no intention of not doing the shows anymore. But right now, just with the restricted capacity, it doesn't make any sense. And quite honestly, there's a number of dealers that are of this one thing is it tends to be an older crowd. They're a little bit leery of not social distancing, and that's fine. I had a friend of mine diagnosed last week with COVID. I'm actually doing the first show I've done since the last week of February. I'm leaving for it tomorrow morning. So that's 6-7 months, whatever it is, since I've done a gun show. Looking forward to them restarting with whatever they have in place for protective things. I think personally, the first week in November, we're going to see a lot of changes. It'll either be real good or it'll be real bad.
Sure.
I know how I feel about it, but that's a whole other 3-hour conversation. If it goes away, I think it'll go. I think we're going to see a return to normalcy, not a new normal, but an old normal. People will travel freely and feel good about what they're doing. And when that happens, we're going to, all the little gun shows that I know of that have transpired, just little regional shows, have been slammed over the last couple months. People haven't had anything to do, want to get out of the house, want to get back into the activity. We're staring hunting season. Heck, it started in most places now. There's a lot to drive it. You know, the economy definitely needs to be on an upward tick for people to be comfortable spending money. But I think we're going to be able to overcome this. This has been, for most people I know, just the absolute most miserable year they've ever had. And I'll be darn glad when the calendar actually does say January 1st, 2021. I'm just hoping this wasn't a warm-up for things to come. We'll find out. But looking into my crystal ball, my November show is in jeopardy, but I think 2021 will start to see people doing
well, I absolutely hope you're correct about that. I hope your crystal ball is right. 2021, I hope, is better. It can't get much worse. If anyone is trying to reach you, Mike, wants to talk to you about collecting, wants to maybe look at some of your fine collector items for sale, or has a great deal that they want to talk to you about possibly purchasing, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, my email address, pretty simple, mike@vintagearms.com. I do have a simple website. I don't put most of my inventory on it because it takes too long. It just gives you the background of the company and what we do. It's vintagearms.com. You can reach the office at 847-548-0433. We do estate appraisals, we do collection appraisals, we do consignment work. We pretty much do everything. We do transfers. I don't stock ammunition as a rule. Occasionally I'll end up with some from a collection I've purchased or something along those lines, but I'm not your go-to guy for ammo. Unless it's really off the wall, I usually have some of that. But that's, me. I'm in the business to be in the business, and I enjoy what I do. I'm the last guy to call to ask what set of sights to put on your AR-15. I'm probably the first guy to call when you discover you got a Winchester 94 rifle and there's some kind of lever on the end of the magazine tube and you don't know what that does. We can walk you through that. So that's me. And there's a need for me as much as there's a need for everybody else.
Absolutely. Everyone's got their niche. I'm glad you were able to spend some time discussing yours.
One thing we do different is I'm never going to be able to retire selling stuff. I'm in this business to build long-term relationships, whether we talk once a year, once every 2 years, or once every 2 weeks. I try to be there for my customers. I will give you my honest opinion. Occasionally I'm wrong. I'm human. But, this isn't we have a lot of fun. And it usually shows that I enjoy what I do. So it makes me easier to do that. beyond that, everybody needs to be safe. You need to pay attention to your surroundings. You need to pay attention politically. And I'm not telling you how to vote, just pay attention. I was talking with my wife realtor this morning, and I'm like, I don't even know where to go anymore to get good information that isn't politicized or tainted.
Mike, thank you very much for being on the show today with me. I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge. Thank you very much for giving me your input on the idea of why people collect. I still might not agree, but it was nice to get that input.
Well, hey, you may change.
Everyone may change. So
I go play someday, and I'll see if I can change your mind.
I look forward to it, Mike. That's going to wrap it up for today. I want to thank everybody for listening. Stay tuned to future episodes. I've got some great episodes coming up with some great guests, some nationally recognized firearm instructors. I've got another firearm instructor who spends a lot of time working with youths. That's going to be a great show. If you've got an idea for a future podcast, I want you to hit me up at alphakoncepts.com/podcast. And definitely like and subscribe to this podcast for future episodes. As always, everybody, be armed, be trained, and be alpha.